It's a foolishness that I don't think is worth my time. There's so much evidence that we did go, and I don't feel I need to defend myself against it. That's Neil Armstrong, first man to walk on the moon.
From high atop the battlements of Castle Curmudgeon, where we open tonight with a friendly reminder that there is no such thing as a dark side of the moon, but there most decidedly is a dark side of human stupidity and credulousness. Good evening, Mr. and Mrs. America, and all ships at sea. Welcome to the Blast Radius. So glad to have you with us tonight. Hope you're having yourself a pleasant Easter Sunday, and it's been a good week for your humble correspondent, because I am delighted to report that finally, at long last, there has been a manned lunar mission launched within my lifetime. And I wasn't born yesterday, so this is quite a welcome change of pace, to be sure. But you know who's not having a very good week at all? One of my favorite groups of people, the Apollo deniers, the moon hoax theorist community, if you will, the people who materialize, and they always materialize whenever normal, sane adults are trying to discuss human spaceflight to regale us with their very confident, very unequivocal assertions that men have never flown to the moon. Hell, there might be one in the chat right now already. There often is. The Apollo denier community is having a bad week because they just don't know what the hell to do about Artemis 2. For right now, a crew of 2 American men, 1 American woman, and 1 Canadian stowaway are hurtling through cislunar space, and the moon hoaxers just don't know what to do about it. You might say it has produced a bit of a schism in their religion. Now, for some Apollo deniers, they say, damn it, we have to maintain our ideological consistency. It is impossible for men to fly to the moon. It was impossible 55 years ago. It will always be impossible. This is just an updated version of the fake Hollywood hocus pocus that they pulled off back in the Apollo days when they had Stanley Kubrick shoot the fake moon landings. The only difference now is they've got a different director and some better CGI. But for other Apollo deniers, their sense of credulity and their devotion to their chosen secular religion doesn't extend quite that far. Those Apollo deniers are willing to accept that we are flying to the moon for real right now today here in the year 2026, but we didn't really fly to the moon back in 68 through 72. And it makes me feel really quite uncomfortable to distinguish reasonable Apollo deniers from unreasonable Apollo deniers, but I guess that is where we are now. Now, do I have any questions about the Artemis 2 mission? Yes, in fact, I have 2 right off the bat. Number 1, why did we allow the Canadian stowaway on board? And number 2, Why does he get to have his own food? Maple bites. The Canadian guy gets to have maple bites. Do I know what a maple bite is? I do not. When I saw that the Canadian stowaway gets to have his own food supply, did I instinctively assume it was going to be poutine and freeze-dried moose testicles? Maybe. So the maple bites possibly are the lesser of the two Canuckus evils, but who knows? That's not important now. The important thing is younger people often fail to appreciate is that Apollo denialism did not emerge immediately after Apollo, nor did it enjoy anything remotely resembling mainstream respectability during the years immediately following the lunar landings. Because in the actual 1970s, the real 1970s, which were inhabited by millions of people who had watched the launches live, watched the splashdowns live, watched exhausted astronauts emerge from quarantine trailers, watched ticker tape parades, watched congressional hearings, watched technical briefings, watched their own tax dollars disappear into gigantic Saturn rockets. There simply was not much social oxygen available for pretending the whole enterprise had been staged on a soundstage somewhere in Nevada. The evidentiary burden was simply too overwhelming, and more importantly, the witnesses were still too numerous and too fresh in the public consciousness. You had nearly 400,000 people involved directly or indirectly in the Apollo program: engineers, machinists, programmers, flight controllers, naval recovery crews, contractors, radio technicians, trajectory analysts, test pilots, materials scientists, photographers, and industrial workers that were spread across universities, private firms, military installations, and federal agencies from coast to coast. And this was not hidden work. This was performed in full public view through companies like Boeing and North American Aviation and Grumman, under scrutiny not merely from American journalists, but from every hostile intelligence apparatus on the face of the earth. To fake Apollo would have required a conspiracy so vast that it would have demanded perfect silence from a workforce larger than many American cities. And this, one should note, would have been the same federal government that simultaneously failed to conceal the Watergate scandal, which involved roughly half a dozen burglars, one nervous administration, and one tape machine. Yet the denialists existed. Always they have existed. Usually in that older ecosystem of analog crack pottery. Men producing mimeographed pamphlets, self-published paperbacks, and newsletters mailed physically through the Postal Service to a readership consisting largely of other men who also distrusted fluoridation, suspected flying saucers over cornfields, and believed geometry inside pyramids cured insomnia. That mattered because madness in those years required labor. A crank had to type out his content. He had to print it. He had to staple it. He had to buy postage. He had to mail it out. Civilization, in short, enjoyed a natural economic barrier against such nonsense. And for a while, that barrier worked magnificently. Chapter 2, when conspiracy becomes prestigious. And then came the early 1990s, when America committed one of its more expensive cultural mistakes. It decided that conspiracy thinking, if photographed attractively enough, constituted intellectual seriousness. The chief architect here was the film JFK, which may be remembered by some as a stylish political thriller, but ought more properly to be remembered as a national seminar in epistemological vandalism. Now, to be fair, Oliver Stone did not invent conspiracism. America had conspiratorial habits well before Stone was old enough to even rent a camera. But what he accomplished, and accomplished rather brilliantly, unfortunately, was to teach millions of otherwise ordinary citizens that suspicion itself could be mistaken for intelligence, that a rapid sequence of ominous cuts, selective testimony, dramatic pauses, and unresolved contradictions could produce the emotional sensation of revelation without any corresponding obligation to historical discipline. The poison of JFK was not merely that people left theaters believing nonsense about John F. Kennedy. The deeper poison was that they left the theater believing official documentation, institutional records, technical evidence, and ordinary historical consensus were somehow vulgar things trusted only by very naive people. The emotional reward shifted. To reject consensus became glamorous. To imply hidden layers became sophisticated. To distrust expertise became morally adventurous. And once a culture learns that posture, Apollo becomes irresistible prey. Because Apollo contains every feature that conspiratorial minds dislike the most: gigantic institutions, highly technical language, elite expertise, classified Cold War infrastructure, and above all, an achievement so immense that many people feel psychologically smaller in its very presence. And for certain temperaments, feeling small before greatness produces not admiration, but resentment. So instead of marveling that human beings built a machine capable of crossing 240,000 miles, entering into lunar orbit, descending onto another celestial body, relaunching, docking, and returning safely, a growing number of people found emotional comfort in deciding that none of it happened because greatness on that scale offended their instincts. Conspiracy thus ceased to be merely a fringe phenomenon. It became fashionable enough to feel literate while still feeling wrong, which is a dangerous thing to teach in a democracy, because once people enjoy the feeling of secret superiority, they become very reluctant to surrender it. Chapter 3. The internet discovers that there is money in lunacy. By the late 1990s, Apollo denialism underwent the transformation that has afflicted nearly every species of nonsense in modern life. It discovered scalability. The arrival of the internet coincided almost perfectly with a public already softened by cinematic conspiracy culture, and the result was immediate. For the first time in human history, a man could misunderstand a photograph in his basement and instantly locate thousands of strangers who were predisposed to tell him he had overturned half a century of aerospace history. Before that moment, error remained geographically lonely. Now, it became a communal exercise, and once it became communal, it became profitable. The emblematic figure here is Bill Kaysing, whose book, We Never Went to the Moon, became the foundational scripture for a generation of moon hoax enthusiasts, despite the awkward fact that Kaysing possessed neither lunar expertise nor flight engineering credentials, nor meaningful proximity to mission design sufficient to justify overturning thousands of specialists. But qualifications mattered less than tone. Kaysing wrote with certainty, and certainty has always sold better than mathematics. Then cable television arrived, hungry for inexpensive content. Suddenly, every photographic artifact could become a documentary. A shadow diverging across uneven terrain became proof. A flag oscillating after being manually twisted became proof. The absence of stars in daylight exposure lunar photography became proof. And because television rewards dramatic narration far more than patient optics, millions encountered technical ignorance packaged as revelation. Entire websites followed. Forums multiplied exponentially. Grainy scans of mission photographs were enlarged until pixels became theology. Men who had never studied focal length or exposure time or reflected light or vacuum behavior or regolith texture began issuing pronouncements as though they had personally audited the NASA payroll records. And then came the financial incentive. Lots of books were sold, lots of DVDs were sold, lots of opportunities emerged on the speaking circuit. A permanent market appeared for telling audiences that every engineer of the Apollo era had either lied or been fooled or somehow participated unknowingly in history's largest theatrical production, which remains astonishing chiefly because the alternative explanation that the missions occurred exactly as they were documented requires infinitely fewer miracles. But miracles of ignorance, it turns out, are commercially durable, especially once algorithms begin handsomely rewarding them. Chapter 4. Apollo denialism becomes ecumenical. Now, one of the most irritating things about Apollo denialism is that it has achieved what almost nothing else in modern political life can claim to have achieved, and that is bipartisan stupidity. It cuts across nearly every demographic boundary with impressive efficiency. The far left embraces it for reasons entirely consistent with its own suspicions. Apollo becomes, in that imagination, Cold War myth-making, imperial theater, nationalist spectacle, military-industrial propaganda designed to sanctify American power during a morally compromised geopolitical age. Therefore, because the American state exaggerates other things, then Apollo too must be an exaggeration. Greatness itself becomes politically suspicious. For parts of the far right, meanwhile, Apollo is rejected for almost opposite reasons. There, the suspicion is not empire, But bureaucracy, large federal institutions are presumed fraudulent by default. Therefore, NASA becomes simply another cathedral of official deceit, no more trustworthy than any other technocratic authority issuing statements in polished language. Thus, we have one side that says the empire lied because the empire always lies, and we have another side that says the bureaucracy lies because the bureaucracy always lies, and both somehow arrive at the same extraordinary conclusion that 400,000 participants coordinated history's most elaborate fraud and maintained silence for well over half a century. Not one meaningful defection, not one engineer producing authentic proof, not one credible whistleblower with documents sufficient to survive basic scrutiny, and not even hostile confirmation from the Soviet Union, whose own tracking systems followed Apollo missions in real time and whose political interests would have positively rejoiced in exposing fraud had fraud existed. The Soviets, one notices, never claimed that Apollo was a fake because, unlike modern internet prophets, the Soviets owned radio and radar equipment. Foreign observatories tracked the missions. Independent astronomers followed trajectories. Amateur radio operators heard the transmissions. Lunar samples were distributed internationally and examined by geologists who understood what terrestrial rocks do and do not look like. Yet somehow, none of that matters to the modern conspiracist, because conspiracism does not operate by cumulative evidence. It operates by emotional preference. The conclusion is chosen first of all. Everything else becomes theater arranged around the conclusion, which is why Apollo denialism persists equally well among people who otherwise agree on absolutely nothing else. Shared ignorance, after all, can be astonishingly ecumenical. Chapter 5, the present age in which everyone is an aerospace engineer. And now we arrive in our current epoch, where Apollo denialism has become so culturally ambient that no discussion of human spaceflight can occur without summoning self-appointed auditors of lunar history. Mention some new crewed mission, and immediately someone appears asking why the flag moved. Mention lunar geology, and someone out of the woodwork declares that government laboratories can forge rocks. Mention the Van Allen radiation belts, and suddenly a man whose highest technical achievement this week was reconnecting a Wi-Fi router begins speaking as though he personally reviewed the shielding tolerances for the Apollo lunar module. This is perhaps the most distinctive pathology of the present century. Ignorance no longer inhibits confidence, rather, it fertilizes it. Social media has perfected that condition. The loudest fool now reaches the broadest audience because certainty travels faster than explanation, and explanation, unfortunately, requires patience. To explain why stars do not appear in lunar surface photographs requires discussing exposure values. To explain shadows requires discussing terrain geometry. To explain communications requires discussing telemetry, relay paths, and tracking networks. To explain why no giant cover-up occurred requires explaining human institutions realistically, namely, that no institution involving hundreds of thousands of people has ever maintained total secrecy when smaller scandals are leaking constantly. But the modern Apollo denier does not arrive seeking explanation. He arrives seeking performance. He wants the posture of being the one man in the room who is courageous enough to ask questions, even when the questions were answered exhaustively well before he was born. And because digital culture mistakes repetition for insight, these same exhausted claims return endlessly like badly trained pigeons landing on the same windowsill, which leaves us in the peculiar position that humanity is once again flying crewed missions around the moon while large portions of public discourse remain trapped, arguing whether the first 8 lunar flights and 6 landings actually happened. A civilization may survive many irrational habits. It is less obvious how long it remains intellectually serious when every technical achievement must first survive amateur prosecution by people enlarging JPEGs at midnight. And that, perhaps, is why every successful lunar mission now carries an additional civic function. It does not merely advance exploration, it humiliates stupidity in real time. And so here we are, ladies and gentlemen, half a century after the Apollo 11 landing with a fresh crew once again threading cislunar space, while somewhere tonight an Apollo denier sits hunched over a glowing screen explaining that none of this is really possible, except perhaps the parts that are happening right now, which are possible only because apparently physics itself began cooperating sometime between 1972 and now. And perhaps that is the final indignity of this whole business. That humanity's greatest engineering achievement must forever share oxygen with men who cannot distinguish camera exposure from fraud, nor national accomplishment from theatrical deception, yet speak with all the confidence of a launch director 3 bourbons deep. Meanwhile, the Canadian stowaway is still up there nibbling on his maple bites and probably still complaining about that Olympic hockey final, if I know anything about Canadians. The spacecraft continues obediently along its translunar path, and the moon, indifferent, ancient, and perfectly real, remains where it has always been, serenely orbiting above a species still capable of building rockets magnificent enough to reach it, but with minds foolish enough to insist that we never did. With that, we close out the checklist on this week's Field Guide. We wish Godspeed to the men and lady of Artemis II. Yes, even you, Mr. Canadian Stowaway. And we look eagerly forward to the big lunar flyby tomorrow afternoon. And I now lovingly convey you into the custody of my distinguished colleague, your illustrious co-host, the one and only, your friend and mine, Mr. Caucasian Sasquatch.
Tactical nuke incoming!
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Blast Radius. We are going to discuss, of course, Artemis 2. Also, Alien Romulus. Apparently, Cap hates me, wants me to watch terrible films, so I watched it. Yeah, and I sat down and hammered out some stuff at Gemini. I told it what I thought about it and asked it to put it into a conscientious paragraph structure, and it did. So I'm going to read that out because, frankly, it said it better than I could have. If I could have sat down and written it, I might have written the very same thing. So, we're going to do some of that. I have a hypothetical alternate history concept that I'm going to throw in here later if I can remember what it was. And we're probably going to close out hating absolutely everybody equally because we're not racist. How you feel about that, Kat?
We love hating people and we love not being racist.
Exactly, because it's equal. Equity. That's what it's all about, right? So, where do you want to start? Excellent point. We'll try again when your camera catches back up.
Yeah, I'm looking eagerly forward to hearing your Gemini review.
All right, you want to go ahead and do that thing? Because all right, so here's what I did.
Yeah, let's do that thing.
I requested 5 paragraphs about Alien Romulus, and I pointed out several scenes in a row that showed the issues I had with the film. And it took that, and it created these 5 paragraphs that I'm about to read to you. And so it's going to sound like I'm reading because I am. I'm not doing this off the cuff. Alien Romulus attempts to revitalize the franchise by returning to its claustrophobic horror roots, but in doing so, it inadvertently centers its narrative on a protagonist whose Mary Sue invincibility and girl boss archetype make her the most destructive force in the entire film. Rain Carradine, the film's lead, is presented not as a vulnerable survivor, but as a flawlessly competent tactician from the opening frames. By imbuing her with an unearned mastery over complex xenobiotic threats and Weyland-Yutani technology, the film strips away the tension essential to the alien mythos, turning her into the apex predator that actual monsters never truly stand a chance against. Rain's character arc, or rather a lack thereof, is the hallmark of a modern Mary Sue trope. Unlike Ellen Ripley, who suffered significant losses and climbed a steep learning curve in the 1979 original, Rain navigates the derelict Renaissance station with a preternatural confidence that defies her background as a mere colony laborer. She displays an instinctive understanding of pulse rifles, orbital mechanics, zero-gravity combat that borders on the clairvoyant. This level of girl boss hyper-competence serves as a narrative shield, making her presence feel less like a human struggle for survival and more like a mechanical inevitability, where the monsters are merely props to showcase her perfection. Furthermore, Rain acts as an actual monster through her cold, singular focus on Furthermore, Rain acts as the actual monster through her cold, singular focus on her own goals, often at the expense of the supporting cast who exist only to facilitate her ascension. While the xenomorphs follow their primal biological imperatives, Rain operates with a calculated, ruthless mask as here. A primal Blah, blah, blah. Xenomorphs follow their primal biological imperatives. Rain operates with a calculated ruthlessness masked as heroism. Her relationship with Andy, her synthetic brother, is particularly telling. She manipulates his programming and relies on his expendability to ensure her own path remains clear. In this light, the traditional monsters are almost sympathetic victims of a protagonist that possesses the main character energy to warp the laws of physics and biology to suit her survival. That is a definition of plot armor. The horror of the Alien franchise has always been rooted in the fragility of the human form against the perfect organism, but Rain's girl boss status flips this dynamic on its head. When she enters a room, the xenomorph lose their status as terrifying cosmic horrors and become minor inconveniences. Her ability to execute flawless maneuvers in the face of certain death removes the stakes for the audience. By being too perfect to fail, she becomes a narrative anomaly, a monster of plot armor that consumes the atmosphere and dread of the setting until only her own legend remains. Ultimately, Alien Romulus fails to realize that by making Rain an untouchable icon of female empowerment, it has sacrificed the very humanity that made the series relatable. The monster in this film isn't the creature with the acid blood, but the protagonist who cannot bleed, cannot fail, cannot be challenged. Rain walks through the carnage of the film, not as a survivor, but as a conqueror, leaving the audience to wonder if the true horror is the realization that the xenomorph is no longer the most dangerous thing in the room, but the Mary Sue script is. Now, I like that. I thought that was pretty pimp myself. And we'll have Cat back here in just a minute. He's got to reset his stuff. But until then, enjoy this silliness. That is actual footage of France's space program. Did you catch that tidbit?
Yes, and I caught most of your review, but I had to restart my browser because things were going cattywampus.
Yeah, we don't like the cattywampus. I actually dig it. I think it did a pretty good job given what I told it. I may do more stuff like that because, you know.
I think it normally does a pretty good job. I mean, if you said 5 paragraphs, and you told it the tone you wanted and the things you specifically wanted to mention, and it's just as good a review as you would get from any professional film critic, although that might be damning you with faint praise.
Well, no, I mean, I would make the argument that I've probably seen more films than most film critics.
If the machines can do it better than people, then let the machines.
So be it. Then so let it be written, and so let it be done.
We have
one thing I do like about it is he takes such great and wonderful stills when this happens and he's stuck. He almost always looks magnificent. Oh, welcome back.
What were you saying about me looking magnificent?
That was when the camera froze. You looked like you were giving a dissertation to the freaking forum. Like you were making a point. It was flawless. So if you can go through and go find that clip it, make it your avatar in StreamYard, that would be awesome.
This is what I look like when I'm sternly lecturing the Apollo denier community.
There you go. So your take on the movie. Let's start with the opening. Chick. Somehow these two things are true. She owns an android and is too broke to buy passage off planet.
See, my problem I had starting out was I kind of have to balance my looking for 21st century woke trope movie making with remembering what franchise I'm watching. And it's very easy to say in the first act of a picture like this, and maybe it's true, maybe it's not true, that we're just seeing a 2020s recyclable, disposable, girl boss, perfect, don't need no man for nothing cinematic narrative that's just like the previous 500 that came before it. But then I find I stop myself and I think, but however, didn't the Alien franchise, wasn't it that franchise that first originated the whole concept of a badass female protagonist saving the day and being a legitimate action hero, even if she's in her underwear and you have to spend $25,000 airbrushing her pubes out because she doesn't want to trim her cooter, then shouldn't it get the benefit of the doubt for that? Or should it get the benefit of the doubt? Should it or should it not? Is the Alien franchise allowed to do things with female girl bossery that other franchises shouldn't be allowed to do? I guess ultimately is my overriding question.
Yeah, I see that's been one issue I've had with the entire concept of putting a girl boss in Aliens. It's unneeded. It's unnecessary. The template has already been led as to exactly what the maximum level of girl bossery could be, and she killed one of these things with her bare hands. So, you know,
Yeah.
and then this chick shows up and literally mows down an army of them like fucking Master Chief holding the bridge. Like, oh,
I love it
God.
I love it when the rifle aims for me.
Hey,
dead,
even
you're dead,
even
you're
with
dead.
that, bro. Even with there's things like a pulse, that damn gravity generator kicking in and out when it's most convenient. Like,
Yeah,
that
I
thing.
actually I thought it was a clever sequence, the where they're in zero G and they have to float around the floating globules of alien acid blood before the gravity generator kicks in again. I thought that
Yeah,
was a clever and well conceived sequence, and I
I
enjoyed
liked
it
it.
quite a lot. Yeah, I did too.
Problem I have with it is it wasn't the robot that used the gun to swerve around the edge of the damn acid. It was her. She just flicks
Oh yeah,
herself out there, looks completely screwed until the last second when she's like, pop, pop, and then just lays down. She, if you look back at what she went over, dude, the path that she was on to start with, she could have crawled down that damn thing and went under most of the acid that was there. Now, granted, this shit is like, it's very corrosive. It kills two people in here with like just a couple of drops. One dude dies
yeah.
because a drip drops on his head. Another one because it drips on his chest over his heart.
And ultimately, it winds up decompressing the whole spacecraft.
True, true. So there's
Melts
that.
right out the bottom. Of course, although how does it melt out the bottom when there's no gravity generator engaged? I guess that's a question for another time.
That is now you calm down, sir. That is Heisenberg's uncertainty generator, and it's the whole reason this film occurred. Yes. Ridley
But
Scott
also
designed it himself.
I'm glad you brought up Ridley Scott because I was really kind of, I feel like I was hoodwinked into watching this movie. I feel like I was groomed or preyed on just a little bit because it started out when I went to HBO Max to watch something completely different, and the first thing on top of my home screen was Alien Romulus. I didn't think too much about it. I said, "Oh, another Alien movie. What's that? 65 Alien movies now?" And I watched the thing I was going to watch and went on about my day. And then the next day, I get a story in my feed. You know, it's one of those, basically it's like an advertisement, but it pretends to be a news story, and it's Alien Romulus has just come out on HBO Max and it's gotten such splendid reviews, and Ridley Scott returns to the franchise after such and such many years. They very much wanted the reader to think that Ridley Scott directed the picture, but Ridley Scott did not direct the picture. It's just one of those deals where he agreed to have his name put on it as an executive producer in exchange for, you know, a flat fee and probably some percentage
A
of the
big pile
grosses.
of money about this size.
But yeah, when I actually proposed us watching and reviewing and talking about it, I was still under the mistaken assumption that Ridley Scott had directed the picture, which didn't wind up being true. So I do apologize for that, but I still think it's
So what you're
probably
saying is you don't hate me. That's good to know. I was kind of upset with you about halfway through that one. When that fucking face hugger jumped at the glass, I was mad. I was immediately angry.
Yeah, and we finally get to meet the human xenomorph hybrid and the cartoon bastard child of Ian Holm, which is another thing we need to talk about with this picture. I thought we were farther along with as far as digitally reanimating deceased actors. I thought we were getting pretty good at it. I mean, 10 years ago, we had Grand Moff Tarkin in Rogue One, where they digitally reanimated Peter Cushing. And, it was, I'm not going to say
terrible.
It looked good, but it looked terrible. Yeah, it probably looked terrible. It didn't get across the canny valley, but in the 10 years since then, I think we've gone a long way toward bridging the uncanny valley, if you will, if indeed it ever can be bridged. But I feel like with this digital reanimation of the late Ian Holm in this Alien Romulus picture, we might have set ourselves back a further decade, because this is just about this is 2010 level. I mean, if you want me to go even farther than that, you remember the Scorpion King? Remember when The Rock was in the Scorpion King, and it was like they stapled his cartoon face on top of the fucking desert scorpion monster? That's what it reminded me of. That's how bad it was. And that movie was in what, 2001, 2002? That's how bad this was. Ian Holm's cartoon face, unconvincing cartoon face, just takes me out of the movie every time. His voice sounds convincing. I would like to know how they did his voice, but my God, the visual presentation, I don't know if they ran out of budget. It doesn't look like they ran out of budget, because they had plenty of budget for everything else. The CGI exteriors all look perfectly splendid. Some of them are quite gorgeous. The exteriors they all look fine, but the Ian Holm cartoon face just drags the whole thing down. It's almost bad enough to drag it from a thumb up to a thumb down, in my view. And maybe that's going too far, but what say you?
Maybe I should have changed the horror element from being the protagonist to being that scene, because it's pretty bad. And maybe I don't know if it's bad because it's objectively bad, or it's bad because the rest of the movie looks so phenomenal, right? It is a very pretty film. If you want to sit and watch some pretty lights, kind of the same thing I said about what was it? Communist slow motion wheat harvesting in space. Was that Scargiver? If you're not going to be paying attention to the Rebel Moon, I said, if you're not going to be paying attention to the plot and you don't care what the story's about and you just want to see some pretty pictures, put it on and make out with your girl. You'll do just fine. That being said, with the quality of the rest of the film being so high, and the dialogue wasn't terrible, even with the skippy freaking android running around in there, with a couple of notable exceptions. They had this one thing with the android, who apparently loses his memories on a regular basis or something like that. He tries to tell jokes, right? And as an android, obviously, he doesn't really have that ability. But at the same time, he's not just an android, he's damaged, so he's special. Now, how it is that she's allowed to, like, this completely broke, impoverished, currently doesn't even actually have a job with this company, gets to keep company property, I never was explained. It's just said it was her dad's. She calls her her brother. And so that none of that makes any sense.
And
it is the MacGuffin.
Yeah, and when we start out the picture, like we were discussing backstage before the show, it kind of gave me the feeling like this is going to be such an on the nose woke race politics movie that I don't even know if I'm going to be able to stand it, because we start out with a female girl boss protagonist who basically has her own pet slave, and then her English accent friends like to be mean to her pet slave, and the impression they're trying to create, I think, is quite obviously a couple of white British dudes being intolerably racist toward a black guy. And the conceit in which it works here is that, well, he's not really a black guy, he's just an android. And that I'm pleased to say it didn't keep going down that road quite as much as I feared that it might be going to. And I thought the performance of the guy who plays the android, that was the only interesting acting performance in the picture, I thought. And I thought he carried it off pretty well, because he has to start off being very innocent and childlike. He's basically a little girl's pet, and that's all he's programmed to be. He is, if I remember it correctly, he's one of the one of the earlier models of synthetic that later got superseded by the Ian Holm model, whom he meets later, and then the Ian Holm android imprints its own personality onto him with the little chip, and then he has to play, and then he goes from playing, innocent, childlike companion.
I tell you, that one wasn't completely telegraphed by the script. I mean, I saw that shit when they were like, "Yeah, but you've got one of those handies, right?" And I'm like, "Oh my god, Ian Holmes is gonna eat this thing." You know that, right?
Yeah.
I'm sitting here in a room by myself, and I'm like scrolling through TikTok. Ian Holmes is gonna devour that thing. It's gonna be like fucking Jarvis and Ultron.
Yeah, I made a point of watching it attentively, as I like to do sometimes when we're gonna talk about a movie on the show. So, no other screens in the background, not scrolling through any devices, watching the whole film attentively. And when I watch a whole film attentively and still have basic questions that I feel like I didn't get a satisfactory answer to, then when I have watched attentively, I feel like I am entitled to think that way. And there were a few things that did make me think that way. I mean, I watched this whole movie attentively. I couldn't tell you any of the characters' names. Except
Not one.
The android.
Go ahead.
Go ahead. No,
there's pregnant chick. There's main protagonist. There's Asian driver with the left blinker on. There's the chunky dude, and then the short dude, and that's how I know them. And they're all evil.
There's racially ambiguous girl boss protagonist, Asian girl boss protagonist who they let drive the car. How seriously am I supposed to take a movie where they let the Asian woman drive a car? But anyway, we'll move on. Then we have Latina girl boss protagonist. And then we have
who's knocked up.
Who's knocked up. Then we have vaguely evil British guy number 1 and vaguely evil British guy number 2. And then we have the android, and then we have Ian Holm, and that's pretty much it, aside for the xenomorphs and the face huggers and the alien human hybrid whom we get to meet in the third act.
Which is more like a Temu Slender Man than an alien human hybrid.
Yeah, I was really not blown away by the CGI on that one either. I very
that wasn't it. Actually, I was perfectly satisfied with the level of CGI. I was not satisfied with the actual look of the monster. Like the monster aspect of it was just human enough to keep you from wanting to split its wig wide open with like double aught buck, but not human enough to actually stop me from doing it. Ka! Show's over, folks. We're going home.
I think it probably would have been better if they had kept that creature in shadow the whole time and not shown it fully lit up.
I think the way that would have improved this film is if they had gone in, successfully got a stack of 6 pods. So all Yutani Corporation are stacks in 5. They find a place where they have them stacked in 6, right? So, okay, we'll be able to take the android with us. Fine. But when they get it back to the ship and they crack it open, they find some chick alive in there, right?
Yeah.
Because, I mean, it was a whole space station and they did have sleeper pods. So if that's the case, then they get the infestation through the pod rather than having to go on the ship and actually, they fight them on the ship and actually escape with the pods. Yes, right? And they're going to turn and make their jump to wherever they're going, and they open the pods and find out, wait, there's somebody in this one. And then they have them another little fight where chick gets tagged with a face hugger, and then another chick gets tagged with the face hugger or whatever. And then there's a big fight and they kill the face hugger. And 20 minutes later, one of the xenomorphs starts forming, or even better, they get stuck in the pod and then dip. And when they get to where they're going, one of the xenomorphs has already escaped and the other one is the half-breed baby, right? Yeah. That's a totally different movie, and all of the plot points catch.
Right. And I think they actually did a pretty good job initially of laying out the premise of the story and the narrative, and being mindful of who their audience was likely to be, because I think more often than not their audience is likely going to be people like me and not people like you, because as we established the last time we watched the last Alien show and talked about it, you're someone who knows far more about the lore of this franchise than I do. For me, I've seen some of the other movies, but the only parts of this franchise that I have actually committed to memory are really the first two movies, and that was the only stuff in this franchise that I know by heart. And I felt like they were catering to me when they first started off the opening moments of the picture. I felt like it was within my ability with my limited knowledge base to grasp, because they established right at the beginning that they are, it's the wreckage of the Nostromo, and they're trying to recover the xenomorph that Ripley blew out the airlock at the end of Aliens, and then they're taking it to this station named Romulus, and they are trying to breed more face huggers to create a basically a super vaccine, I guess you would describe it, right? They have discovered a special property of the excretions of the xenomorphs and the face huggers that when spliced with human DNA, they think potentially can be a curative for all of the exotic space diseases that colonists are beginning to suffer from, and our colonization efforts are suffering because of it. And basically, it's a medical research project. Go ahead.
And it's also makes you immune to xenomorph attack. And the idea is to create a human that's a human and immune to everything, and immune to xenomorph attack. They don't attack you because you're one of them. It doesn't work. Anyway, so
in the event you wind up with a big scary monster who's half man and half xenomorph, but whoopsie.
Maybe don't shoot up with their blood. That's all I'm saying.
It sure did work great with the rats, is all I'm saying.
It did not. It did not go well for the rats at all, sir. Let's see. Okay. Something I really liked about it. The opening, like you were saying, did a real good job of kind of expositing everything that needed to be told without just drilling it into your head with like the scrolling or the news flashes or a television program or any of that stuff, right? You just kind of absorb it holistically.
Like the thing Matt Damon was saying when we were talking about his latest movie, where in that interview where he said, well, when you make movies for Netflix now, they say that you have to repeat the premise of the movie in the dialogue at least 4 times so that the people who are just scrolling through shit on their phones while they're watching the movie can keep up.
And that's one of the things that my friends hate about me is my ability to sit there and absent-mindedly let a film play in the background and then turn around and speak intelligently on it. They're like, you weren't even paying attention to it. I watched it. No, you didn't. I did. I heard every word they said, and I was watching it with my peripheral vision, and I know you don't think that's a thing, but when I was working in movie rentals, I sometimes had to cover 5 or 6 different TVs playing 5 or 6 different movies to watch for people cutting in stuff they're not supposed to, or checking our damage, or verifying the length of the film, all that kind of stuff. You know, because people do horrible things. And so I kind of picked up an ability to split my attention several ways and remember the stuff that I saw. And that's part of why I'm back here, over here, pushing buttons and crap, and you're reading monologues.
Oh, yeah. Kids who are too young to remember the VHS era have no idea what they missed.
Until you're watching the middle of Aladdin and see some German scat porn spliced in by an amateur.
Oh, yeah.
You got nothing. You got nothing, sir. An amateur, a rank amateur, sir. I was 12 and could do better.
Or when you're watching Fast Times at Ridgemont High and the tape snaps right when Phoebe Cates is getting her titties out.
Dude, I don't think I've ever actually seen a VHS copy where that part of it was actually in it. Because that's the part that gets watched so much.
That's like
it stretches.
That's one of the most notorious stories from the entire VHS age, was that every rental copy of that movie would always snap right at that exact moment from people pausing it.
Yeah, they had to finish.
And I don't blame them. It's a good place to pause.
So the opening, one of the things that I really enjoyed about the opening, they did a really good exposition, and followed by that, they got you to care about the android who was obviously having issues. He takes the place of the special ed brother, right? The Down syndrome kid or whatever. He's not quite all there. Now he's an android and he's not human, and so trying to like lay ableism or racism or any of that stuff at his feet. It's just on deaf ears to start with. He's an android. He's not even real, right?
Yeah.
Now you can make some humanist type statements if you wish, but whatever. The way they do it is actually really clever. They start off by having her completely exhausted, going to check on some detail or another, and she wakes up, puts her feet on the floor, he walks in and tells her a joke. A bad joke. It's not funny. He says, "You
a dad
get it?"
joke.
It's a dad joke, but it's badly done. The timing is off. The delivery's trash.
Yeah.
Do you get it? And she's like, "Yeah, I get it. You told me that one when I was 12." And they do the breakfast, and he goes, and I don't understand this part. This kind of bothered me a little bit right out the box. She has food vouchers. He brings food voucher, like his vouchered food in, and gives it to her and makes a joke about having bought a belt that doesn't fit him. So she needs to eat this so he can fit his belt. Right. Which is a terrible joke. Ha ha ha. But why did he have food in the first place?
It's a good question. And I was confused by the same thing now that you mention it. Yeah. I don't have an explanation.
I thought that maybe she had made the oatmeal or whatever, and he made the toaster strudel or whatever it was, right? But the whole interaction seems to hinge around the idea that he gets food vouchers too. And that doesn't make any sense because he's an android.
Yeah, that doesn't make a damn bit of sense.
Nary a lick. But still, even with that, which my autism immediately caught and was like, that makes no sense. Why does he have food? What is this about? What's going on? Why is this happening? It folds directly into her walking down the street and him getting distracted by bright, pretty lights at a card game or something, some game of chance. And she's like, "No, we can't do that." "Well, we need more money so we can leap." And she's like, "Well, that's a scam and you'll just lose money if you do that. We got to go do this thing." So he's not sharp enough to not get suckered in by pretty lights. But then she turns around literally the very next second and tells him to stand next to a wall and not get in trouble. This could take a while. And he does.
Yep.
That's the part that gave me problems.
And the only reason they have him do that is so that he can get beaten up by some street thugs, and we can see that he's bleeding white android foam, and we know he's an android. That's how they establish that he's a synthetic, rather than having someone come out and say it. So right. That's they probably built that whole sequence around that reveal rather than just saying it in the dialogue. But you kind of suspect it right off the bat, I think, when he's
the reveal though. The reveal isn't that he's an android. It's that she's got a super secret, deep copy Weyland Yutani?
Weyland Yutani
key that lets her reset earlier model androids. And she uses it on him immediately. And it just fixes whatever damage the beatdown did. And that's the thing. He doesn't get into trouble. He's just standing around and these guys find an android to beat up. That seems to be the plot. They're beating him up because he's an android. Although whenever you pan to it, it looks like they're beating him up because he's black.
Yeah. And that's sort of the thing that caused me to cringe a little bit and say, oh my God, this is going to be the wokest movie ever. It's just going to be like so many movies today are, just a thinly veiled, racism allegory with a science fiction veneer on top of it. But it doesn't wind up being that. And that's to the picture's credit, and it's a relief. And I'm glad they didn't go down that road. And I felt like I'm not going to say it's a great movie, but it was entertaining enough to be worth a couple of hours.
Okay, so I give it 4 Snow Whites and the 7 CGI abominations out of 10 on the woke scale. It is not a terrible film. Has its problems, has its plot holes, and the blood acid seems to kind of hit and miss on what it's going to dissolve and when it's not going to dissolve stuff. But that's been a trope through the whole franchise, so I don't really have a problem with that too much. But it's really glaringly obvious in this one.
And there are some ways in terms specifically of the visual aesthetic and the soundtrack, the background music, where I think it does a better job of living up to the thing that the original Alien movie did, which was the whole unique thing about the first Alien movie was that nobody's ever done a horror movie in space. We've done horror movies about creatures from space, but we've never done a horror movie in space. So that's a new conceit. Also, having the last survivor from the crew be a female and having her be the one that kicks all the ass and defeats the creature, that's also a new conceit. I thought this movie, in some ways, did a better job of living up to that aesthetic than some of the other Alien sequels that I have seen. And there was another question that often occurred to me while I was watching it, and I'd be curious to get your thoughts on this. Where is the dividing line between, let's say, an homage and a memberberry and just outright obnoxious, on the nose nostalgia bait? Because I think this movie has all three of them.
All three of them, unquestionably, and shamelessly, I might add, because they do it so blatantly, you almost miss it unless you're thinking like that. Like the opening sequence where they get into the ship and they're fixing to take off and go to the derelict that they found, right? The decommissioned ship that they're going to go check out. That opening, that sequence of her in there is virtually scene from one of the earlier Alien films. Of I don't think it was the pilot on the first one when he plops down in the seat when they're going to try to leave, and he's like she does all that stuff. She's kind of doing the same thing, but it's a much more monotone, less angry, she's cocky. She's ready to get this over with. She's ready to go do it. She's got to get it. And goes out like a bitch.
And another thing I kind of like about this franchise in general is that they maintain the kind of 70s based future aesthetic that existed in the first movie. Like they still have CRT monitors and big clunky keyboards, and the way that people in 1977, when they made the first picture, imagined that the future was going to look like, and they still portray this world that way. And I think that's a good. It's a good thing. It's a unique thing that sets the franchise apart and does much to make it immediately recognizable. And I think it's a good common thread to weave through all of the different properties, even though there are entirely too many, way too many Alien movies. I probably couldn't even name half of the Alien movies that exist. The only ones I can remember seeing are this one and the first one and the second one and the one where it had Winona Ryder in it when she was at her peak hotness period. That's probably why I remember it. God, she was hot in that movie.
I hadn't even thought about that woman when she was hot.
Yeah, it was over 30 years ago. But yeah, that is peak Winona Ryder in that picture, man.
Heathers, bro.
Yeah.
Oh, Heathers.
Yeah,
Brown Beaver. Yeah.
She only had a brief window, but it was a good window.
It was spectacular. Yeah, so like I said, four Snow Whites out of 10 on the woke scale, and I'm gonna go 1 thumb up for me. I'd watch it again. I might watch it again. I bought it. Might as well.
I think I'm also leaning toward a thumb up. As much
it's
as,
got its problems.
Yeah, and I don't think you can make a movie within a franchise that has had this many entries in it already without it having problems, basically, because you're going to come down to that question we were just grappling with, what is an homage, what is a memberberry, and what is just on the nose obnoxious nostalgia trolling. There were two things in particular in this film that I thought fell into the latter category. The first one, the one that made me eye roll the hardest, was that when the android guy says, "Get away from her, you bitch." I mean, come on, man. Can we just not do that? Do it.
It's you, dude.
It's like the Terminator saying, "I'll be back." It's just too over the top. Just don't do that. Please don't do that.
The freaking scene where you're talking to the reanimated corpse of Ian Holmes. I wasn't watching the screen when that popped up, when he first started talking, I was like, oh, they got the dude, because the voice is spot on. Like, it's great.
Yeah,
I was like,
absolutely.
holy shit. I turned to look, and there's that fucking abomination wiggling its little nefarious lips at me.
I
And
know.
I'm like, are those teeth? Are those veneers? That's definitely not him. I wonder if they put somebody in a blue screen mask and had him talking, and that's why the lips looked like it was pooping out when he was
Well,
talking.
I think they did. I think that's the way those things are generally done. I know that's the way it was done with Peter Cushing and Grand Moff Tarkin in Rogue One 10 years ago. They, in addition to, I guess the first thing you do is you find a stand-in who is as close of a facial resemblance to the guy you're trying to match as you can find, and then you shoot the footage with him, and then you overlay the digital reconstruction of the deceased actor on top of it. And if you've got a close enough facial match, then there's less digital reconstruction that you have to do to get from the one to the other. And the thing that determines how good the likeness is going to be and how convincing it's going to be in the final product when you release the film is how close of a resemblance, how good of a stand-in you can find for the dead actor that you're attempting to replicate. And that's a whole new challenge in the area of film casting.
Solo. When they were casting for Solo, I can't remember the dude's name, but there's a kid out there that looks exactly like Harrison Ford.
I know what you're talking about.
The spitting image, dude, it's scary. And he does like a voiceover thing. He's actually done Harrison Ford, like Han Solo voices in some cartoons and stuff, and looks just like him. And from what I understand, when he does that, he comes in dressed up like Han Solo because it's so funny to everybody. It's Han Solo. Like, you don't need no imagination. And then they film Solo using this other dude because he's got a few movies under his belt and the chicks dig him. And maybe they thought it would be tasteless.
I can't even remember the guy's name.
I can't remember his name either.
Alden something Reich? Alden Ehrenreich? I want to say
something like
name.
that. Something like that.
And,
but anyway,
have we seen him in anything else since Solo? I don't think I have.
Yeah, he does more of like the older ladies' heartthrob nowadays, right? Where he's either the elder gentleman or the elder lady's young companion type shit. But he's funny.
Yeah,
he's hilarious when he wants to be. If you go check him out in some other stuff, he actually has some comedic chops.
That's a tough assignment, though, man. We want you to play one of the most iconic characters in screen history, but we don't want you to do a straight ripoff impersonation of the original. We just want it to be inspired by the original, but you still be you. I would run away screaming from that job as fast as I could run if I cared about the rest of my acting career.
I wonder how many people did. It's a good curiosity. Okay.
I bet the number is not 0. Go ahead.
It's probably not 0. That wraps up our segment on really excellent, terrible movies. I will be watching this one again, mainly because I spent $4 on it, and I'm a cheapskate. So,
yep.
There you go. Beyond that, I might tell some people to watch it just so they can suffer too. See if they have the same issues with it that I do, because I've learned that I'm a Minecraft fan. I hate the Minecraft movie, right? Because there's a lot of stuff in the Minecraft movie that just gets it completely wrong based off of the game entirely. Like, it's just utter trash. And people who don't play Minecraft love the Minecraft movie because it's fun and funny and bright and colorful, and all of the jokes are 10, 15 seconds apart.
Yeah, and they get all the references.
That is also accurate. So, let's transition. What was the alternate history concept? Oh, what if Big Bird was on the Challenger instead of the teacher?
And it's not really much of an alternate history question because it did almost happen in the mid '80s. We were about half a decade into the space shuttle program, which was a very boring and pointless program, and we needed a way of and it had gotten thoroughly passe in the public imagination. It's a fucking space pickup truck, and we go up and we fly around a little while, and then we come back down, and nothing really exciting happens. And so the public had gotten thoroughly bored with the space shuttle program, and NASA and the Reagan administration decided we got to glitz this damn thing up. We need to get the public back on board. We need to get people watching this shit. We need to generate some enthusiasm about this stupid space pickup truck that doesn't do anything very interesting. So the best way to do that, let's put Big Bird on that motherfucker. It was either down to they wanted to do Big Bird, but Big Bird didn't really work out. I guess it was I don't know.
It's a puppet.
Maybe a flammability issue with the Big Bird suit. Who knows?
Possibly.
Maybe you couldn't fit Big Bird in a pressure suit, but they had to abandon the Big Bird idea, and the alternate idea after the Big Bird thing fell through was let's put a teacher in space. It'll be fantastic. We'll have a nationwide competition. It'll be just like the NCAA tournament. We'll have a final 12 and a final 6 and a final 4, and then we'll have a winner. Everybody will be so excited they're going to watch it on TV the whole time, and then we're going to pick some adorable little junior high school teacher from New Hampshire named Krista McAuliffe, and we're going to launch her up in the space shuttle, and it's going to be fantastic. We're going to have kids watch it in the classroom. She's going to teach lessons from outer space in Earth orbit. It's going to be great. Everybody's going to become a fan of the space program again. Just you wait. And then, boom.
There's one point. She will become the second unqualified astronaut into space, right next to the first man. Because there's no way she had the qualifications to do that shit. Talk about a team carrying somebody, dude. She's all dead weight. I bet they gave her diuretics and laxatives before they stuck her in the suit. I bet you.
Yeah,
you need to shed as much as you can.
There is absolutely no way that idea was popular in the astronaut corps. No matter what anybody says in the aftermath, there is no chance it was popular. I guarantee everybody hated it as much as you can hate a thing. Because let's go back to 75, Apollo Soyuz. In fact, let's go back even farther than that. Let's go back to 71, Apollo 14, where Al Shepard, at the advanced age of 47, which all the flight surgeons thought was far too old to be flying a lunar landing mission. But Shepard is the head of the astronaut office, so he gets to assign himself to the flight, and nobody can say shit. And then we get to 75, the final flight of the Apollo spacecraft, the Apollo Soyuz test mission. Deke Slayton, who is Al Shepard's boss at the astronaut office, he says, I was one of the original Mercury 7. I got grounded by the goddamn flight surgeons for a stupid reason. I've been fully returned to healthy flight status now. I don't care if I'm 51 years old. I am flying this mission, and I'll be damned if anybody can say anything about it. And, when you have that kind of executive authority that you can wield on your own behalf, then God bless you. Go ahead and do it. So Shepard flew at 47 and Slayton flew at 51. And yeah, membership has its privileges, you might say.
But there's a point here. Both of those gentlemen passed all of the necessary physicals to become an astronaut in the first place. So It was not a conditioning situation. It was a transient medical condition that was an issue in one case, and he got bumped for another pilot. The other guy got bumped for a pilot, didn't he? I can't remember. How did he get bumped out of his spot?
Shepard had an issue with his inner. It's called
he had an ear infection or some shit. Yeah.
And it's a thing that affects your balance and your equilibrium. And he actually had a very experimental surgery done where that didn't have a very good chance of fixing the problem, but it wound up fixing the problem well enough that he got returned to flight status. And that's kind of the whole reason that he wound up being the head of the astronaut office, because he and Tom Stafford were supposed to fly the first Gemini mission, but then the ear infection thing cropped up, and so they grounded him, and he spends the whole Gemini program and the better part of the Apollo program not even on flight status, flying a desk, doing the crew assignments, and finally he he gets himself qualified and checked out, and you're damn right, I'm going to assign myself to that flight because I'm fully qualified. I don't care if anybody thinks 47 is too old, which is kind of ironic because the crew that we just sent to the moon on Artemis 2 are all aged between 47 and 50. So our thinking on on how advanced that age is has kind of changed a little bit, and as well it should, I think.
At least it has in the culture that is doing this stuff, not necessarily in the paperwork, right?
Yeah.
But what's up, Michael Gambetti? Welcome in, bud. Don't have me whacked. So here we are 50 years later. They're shoestringing a shot around the moon, and the very first notification we get back from it is twofold, and I find it funny, and you can hate me.
The toilet.
1, the toilet doesn't work. 2, the plumber's female.
Oh, I know. There's the jokes write themselves.
I'm not making any jokes. I'm making a point.
But if we wanted to make jokes, they would write themselves. If we wanted to, which
just
of
go
course
ahead.
we
No
don't,
problem.
because we're not a bunch of barbarians around here. We would never make jokes like that. That would be insensitive. That's not a thing we would do. Just like we would never make a joke about Canadian stowaways eating fucking maple bites. Why does the Canadian get to have his own food?
Or the Asian woman leaving her left blinker on for 50,000 fucking miles. Dude, I dropped that joke at the beginning of the show and it just got around to tickling me.
And you know what? I'm just going to say in my own defense, I've had very dear friends and family members who are Asian women, and they make more Asian woman driver jokes than any other type of people I have ever known. Asian women understand better than anybody that Asian women are not good drivers, and they will be the first people to say it. So it's not something we invented. It's just, as they say, every stereotype originates from a little kernel of truth. So it ain't my fault.
I had a buddy of mine in school this many moons ago. He's Native American. He was from out somewhere in Nevada or Utah or something like that. And he was staying with his grandpa for like 4 years or whatever. And this kid knew every Native American joke ever fucking told. And he kind of had this really weird high-pitched voice where he talked a little bit too fast. Sounded kind of like he was from New York or something, you know. But when he would tell the jokes, he would be like, "No, well, you want to hear another joke? I'll tell you. When man is crossing the..." He'd start talking like Iron Eyes. And dude, I couldn't hold it together the second that Native American voice came out of his throat, having heard him talk his normal talk for 3 or 4 days straight. And he would be like, "I am running tree, going with barking wolf. We shall find hunting panda. We're going to have a threesome."
Yeah. So they do the teacher. They do the big teacher in space pageant. They pick Krista McAuliffe. She gets launched. The thing blows up. Every school child in the United States of America gets to watch the thing live on television, except me, the biggest flight geek that ever lived.
2 thumbs and shit out of luck. This guy, 2 thumbs and shit out of luck. And I watched it.
I know I've told this story before, but it bears repeating, so I'm going to tell it again. I'm in 7th grade. It's January of 1986. It's a Lutheran school I'm attending. So on that particular day of the week, we have confirmation class first thing in the morning, where the pastor comes in, the regular teacher leaves, and we do an hour of Bible study. And that happens to be the hour when the Challenger launch was happening. And of course, there was a petition made to, how about let's reschedule confirmation class or do it later in the day so that the kids can watch the Challenger launch that every other school child in the country is watching. And the pastor says, "No, God damn it. We're going to do confirmation class, and we're going to do it good and hard, and they don't need to watch any goddamn space launch because they're going to be reading the Bible." Confirmation class ends, the pastor leaves, the regular teacher comes back, and all we get to hear about the tragedy, because she's been watching TV in the teacher's lounge, obviously, because she's been hanging out with nothing to do until the confirmation class ends. And she says, I will never forget how flatly and matter-of-factly and unemotionally she said this. And this was literally all she said. She said, "Oh yeah, the space shuttle just blew up and everybody died. That was all we got to hear for the rest of the day. Didn't get to have a TV brought into the classroom. Didn't get to hear any further details. We just had to go about the rest of our day knowing that this very high profile space flight had just ended in explosive tragedy. And we didn't get to find out anything else until 3 o'clock when our parents picked us up. And I will always hate that pastor for that.
So my experience is, I think it's like second grade. They bring it, like, we get to school that morning. There's a little bit of an extended assembly meeting, which there was an assembly meeting about twice a week. And this one was not in the normal schedule. We had an assembly meeting. They got everybody together in classes and took everybody to class, and all the classes had a TV, and they came in and they turned on Wacky Races, right, for about 15 minutes. And then they switched the channel, and we were watching the thing take off, and 3, 2, 1, and it keeps playing. And both of the teachers, the teacher assistant and the teacher, looked at each other, turned, and walked out of the classroom. And they left the TV playing. So for the next 15 minutes, we're sitting around watching replays of the space shuttle blow it up, and we're actually debating on whether this is one space shuttle or they just took out our entire fleet. What is it, an alien invasion? What the hell is going on? How many space shuttles do we have? I thought we only had like 2, right? Like the Russians got a copy. I don't know. And then they come back in, like the teacher's assistant come in, and she like real fast walk, like marathon walks over and changes it over to Captain Planet or something like that. I don't remember what it was. It was some other cartoons. And we watched cartoons for like half the day that morning. And there were no teachers anywhere. And here's the weird part. My class was exceptionally terrible. We always got in trouble. We were the absolute worst in every case. We had all of our school trips taken, all of our field days cut short. It was always a problem. We were always a problem. Nobody did nothing that day. We were all kind of in a weird sort of shock because what the hell, right?
Yeah.
How many space shuttles just blew up?
Yeah, nobody really drafted a plan for what to do if the damn thing exploded. But you know, I guess television is a beast that has to be fed, and it has certain exigencies. And as we know, the launch had already been delayed a couple times. It was very unseasonably frigid and cold in Florida in the winter of 86, late 85, early 86. And this big TV extravaganza had already been postponed multiple times. And as a result of pressure from the television people, the launch director's office they developed a case of go fever, I believe they call it. You know, go fever when you go when you know you shouldn't go, but you're going to go anyway. And they knew they shouldn't go because they were well outside the temperature margins that were considered safe for launch, and specifically because they didn't know how the rubber O-rings in the field joints in those solid rocket boosters were going to behave if they launched under a certain temperature, because they hadn't been tested at that temperature. And they did a big, long conference call with Morton Thiokol in Utah the night before, and there was a lot of pressure applied, a lot of very heavy pressure that
he didn't care. He said no.
Yeah, of NASA saying to Thiokol, look, we need you to sign off on this launch, or basically you can say goodbye to ever getting any NASA contracts again. So sign off, and sign off good and hard, and let's light this candle tomorrow. And they got intimidated into signing off, and they wound up launching, and we all saw what happened. And the really inexplicably tragic thing about this is that we are still using those god-awful solid rocket boosters on the Space Launch System that we just used to launch Artemis 2, and I think that is absolutely indefensible. I understand why you still had to use them through the end of the shuttle program, but to still use them now, I hate it. I hate it so much.
They've become our standard JATO. So I mean, you're stuck with them until they make something better or cheaper, whichever comes first.
Which SpaceX has already done.
Sure. So
I
let's
Go
do
ahead.
the alternate history aspect of this.
okay.
Big Bird goes up in the shuttle. Like 20 million freaking American children watch Big Bird die in a great big ball of flame on a cold, cold morning.
You sure as hell can't put Big Bird back on Sesame Street ever again. That's for damn sure.
So what does Sesame Street do? What happens to
Yeah,
the space program?
Sesame Street has to have a funeral for Big Bird, and I think NASA would have had even bigger problems. As shocking as it is to say, NASA would have had even bigger problems killing a cartoon character than they had from killing a teacher. Because
Right.
let's face it, the average American school child at large didn't have any particular emotional attachment to Krista McAuliffe. They just knew she was the nice lady who won the teacher in space contest.
Right.
But every kid in America has an emotional attachment to Big Bird, and they have just watched him perish in a big fiery ball of death.
Exactly. And so Big Bird bites it. The following, Sunday, there's got to be a national fucking funeral on Sesame Street for Big Bird.
Oh, yeah. You have to address it. You can't just say
And
nothing.
then it's going to go further than that because every major cartoon franchise of the day is going to have to do their Big Bird homage. They all did the teacher homage, so they got to do the Big Bird homage, right?
Oh, yeah.
Not KFC, but McDonald's offers their RIP Big Bird meal and the Happy Meal.
Yep.
Little Big Bird in a spacesuit or something. Maybe with a halo and some wings.
I still would love to know how far down the road they got with the Big Bird idea. Like,
I'll tell you.
Are we
I know
gonna launch him
exactly
in the
how far.
costume?
No, I know exactly how far down the road they got. They brought in the costume and laid it over every single one of the astronauts in there and said, "Can you do this?" And they said, "Fuck that! I'm not going to be dressed up as Big Bird in space. No, absolutely, you can scrub me off this mission right now."
Yeah, and if you're one of the regular astronauts, that would explode the resentment factor by at least an order of magnitude. Because as we know, they would have been bothered anyway just by the idea that we basically had a Miss America pageant to pick a teacher to go into space, and there's no way around the fact that if you're a professional astronaut, you are going to take that as an insult if somebody is being launched alongside you who doesn't have any
Well, that's your
meaningful
choice.
training, who basically won a contest and is now going up.
Yeah.
But if they had killed the cartoon, that would have been an even bigger cultural crisis.
It
Probably
would have
something
been.
we can't even conceive of. It would have been.
And I'm trying to wrap my brain around it because here's the thing. You have two choices. You can, since they added a member to the crew anyway, you can add an astronaut to the crew. Doesn't change anything about those damn O-rings. We lose one more astronaut. Everybody eventually finds out who was in the costume. Now, if they had approached it from which one of you boys wants to be the only unknown astronaut in space, right? Big Bird's going to space, and we can never reveal that you were the astronaut in the costume. None of the actual crew members will accept it. How many of them boys you reckon would raise their hand and be like, "Fuck yeah, trolling the world"?
And here's another
Jeff Yeager.
alternate history. Here's another alternate history question for you. If indeed they do wind up selecting Big Bird and launching Big Bird, as we know, it was planned for Krista McAuliffe to teach a couple of elementary level high school class or classroom exercises while she was in orbit that would again be watched by every school child in North America. But what would Big Bird have done if he was up there with all of the school children watching him? Would it have
I
been
know.
would it have been an episode of Sesame Street from orbit?
No, he would fly. Are you joking? That's not even a question. Obviously.
Okay, you got me.
I just don't think you've thought this through, bro. I mean,
Big
that's
Big Bird takes flight for the first time. God, that would be the biggest television
Wouldn't
event of the season.
dude.
That would be
And-
bigger
and-
than Who Shot JR.
Right? Oh my God, I don't know about all that now. Like, that shit was serious.
I know.
So we're going to try to cast Big Bird. Who was on the roster for that time period? And most importantly, who had been shitted on by NASA the most at that point? That might have a reason to put that suit on just to kind of flick them off. Who's silly enough to do it?
That is a fantastic question because you can put anybody in the suit. It's just a suit. It doesn't have to be the guy who normally plays Big Bird.
You get an astronaut.
You could do an actual astronaut, and
Which
I guess
one?
it's up to the astronaut to decide how much of a mockery do I want to make of my own profession. I mean, nobody's gonna know
But
it's
is it?
me, but I'm gonna know it's me. My family's gonna know it's me.
Let's reframe this. Let's reframe this a little bit. We've got what 36 men in the space program at the time that are competent or on the edge of competence to be able to do this mission. You've got a bunch
give
of
or take.
new round folks coming in that are just hot and trotting, fucking the baddest shit that ever walked the earth, right?
Yeah,
and you got
the roster.
The other. Go ahead.
The roster was a lot bigger after we started flying the shuttle, because that's a 6 or potentially 7-man spacecraft as opposed to the 3-man craft we had been flying before. So obviously you have to grow the roster accordingly.
All right, so you have a handful of quote unquote old fogies that are getting transferred out of the unit here real soon. If they don't get a mission, they're not going. And you got a handful of hot shots coming in off the fucking desk immediately who are just hot and trotting, ready to get up in space. But here's the catch: A, we want you to wear the Big Bird outfit, and B, it will not be revealed it was you until after your death. Because Big Bird went to space, not you. Now you get all the benefits, all of everything that goes along with having been an astronaut and gone to space and flown a mission. You get the tag, you get everything. Nobody knows why.
But do you get to wear the gold astronaut pin? Because if you wear
Everything.
the gold astronaut pin, then aren't people going to say, "Wait, you were never
Yes,
officially
of course.
assigned to any flight"?
But that's your choice. You choose if you wear that pin, not us. We're not telling you have to wear the pin, which is kind of the way it works with NASA. You're showing up, you're going to wear the pin. We can't make you because it's your choice to determine when you want to reveal it. And I want you to flash back to an early Chuck Yeager making the statement that he would do anything to be the man in that rocket. And if they came to him and told him, okay, you can do it, but you're going to have to dress up as Big Bird, homeboy would be plashing fucking feathers on his ass faster than you could put the suit on him. Like, he was ready, bro. And I can't help but think there's at least one cocky bastard in that stack that would be like, oh yeah, fuck the cloud. I'm Big Bird. That's way more famous than an
I
astronaut.
think you're right. I think you would have had no shortage of professional astronaut volunteers to wear the Big Bird suit. I think it would have been not a problem. I think some people would have not gotten in the line because they would think of it as just, I don't know, too dehumanizing, too embarrassing. But there would be a much bigger group of people who would say, if this is the only way I'm going to get a flight, then strap the fucking feathers on right now. I am in the car.
Right? But
Yep.
imagine coming home, playing with your kid, watching Sesame Street with them, and your kids are getting 6 or 7 or whatever, and this has all been going on for a while, and then they come to you and they're like, hey, we don't have a flight for you. You're going to be racked out here in the next 8 months, but you could be Big Bird. And you get to go home and tell your kid, I've got to go to space because they need somebody to do a very, very important mission that's super, super secret that I can't tell anyone about until I get back, okay? And you go to space, you do your thing, and you come back and you get to tell your kid, that's me in the Big Bird suit.
And
I'm an
it's
actual
especially-
astronaut here. Yeah. Yeah.
Especially when you consider the fact that by the time we started flying the shuttle in 80, 81, there were still astronauts on the roster who had been on the roster since Apollo, but who never got an Apollo flight. And so they didn't do anything wrong. There's just a limited number of seats on the vehicle and a limited number of flights. So those guys are going to be doing absolutely anything, wearing any costume they can possibly wear in order to actually get a flight before their career runs out, and they have to be an astronaut who never left the ground, because there's a certain ignominy in that status.
Put me in a chicken suit and I'll learn Clucky. Let's go to the moon, folks.
Yep. I will be your big bird, baby. Ladies and gentlemen, thanks ever so much for joining us here on the Blast Radius tonight. We hope you enjoyed the discussion as much as we did, but I'm sure you did, because why wouldn't you? We again wish Godspeed to the men and lady of Artemis II. Even the stowaway Canadian sitting up there in the cargo bay munching on his maple bites. Why does he get to have special food? I still don't know. We'll probably never get a satisfactory answer to that, but who cares anyway? We wish him luck just the same, especially since we beat their ass in the hockey game, and I hope his crewmates are reminding him of that every chance they get. We will see you next week, 8 Eastern, 5 Pacific on Sunday, just as we always do, and the mission will be over by then, and we can talk about how everything came out. Doesn't that sound exciting? I think it sounds exciting. I think you think it sounds exciting too. We hope you have a great tomorrow and a fantastic, edifying Tuesday, magnificent Wednesday, great rest of your week. See you next time. Do not comply. Get off my lawn.
And never forget the French Space Force.
No.